OBS is telling me some stuff that isn't correct. So what are we going to talk about tonight? Accessible names. Because accessible names are essential, but also something that goes wrong very often. It's also hard to get right. Also, even though there's a lot to learn about accessible names, I mean, it's not easy to understand maybe completely. And we're going to use at least 2 browsers to show you some things about accessible names. And who is we? Well, I guess I'm the only one here so far. So who am I? My name is Erik Kroes in Dutch. I am a accessibility specialist. I work as an accessibility lead at ING, a Dutch bank. There I am responsible for the web components, the reusable components that we use throughout the entire organization. And besides that, I'm also a freelance accessibility specialist. So I do audits, I do workshops. I've already talked for about 2 hours today, I think. So yeah, let's add some more to that. And today we talk about accessible names. And the first question is, what is an accessible name? Hey, good evening. Or good afternoon for you, probably. Welcome. What is an accessible name? And that's a bit hard to grasp if you have no experience with accessibility, maybe. A bit hard to grasp if you never had to use assistive technology. One of the most practical examples is that of the screen reader user. A person that uses a screen reader is somebody that uses a piece of software that reads aloud everything that's on a website. That's the first functionality, so it actually reads what's there. And it also makes it able for this person to navigate through the website. And it's a really useful tool because a screen reader can help you find problems within your website. And it's one of the tools that really lets you know if you have accessible names or not. And accessible names have more uses, but the screen reader is one of the most obvious ones. And a screen reader, it's not like every person with a disability uses a screen reader, but it's a really useful tool to test your website with. So it's not like this is the target group, everybody uses a screen reader, no, by far. But a lot of people do get value from whatever you can find with a screen reader. For example, a screen reader makes use of the keyboard API. So the moment you use a screen reader to navigate a website, you're probably using the keyboard API. So it's pretty much like browsing the website with a keyboard. So if you test with a screen reader, you also test for keyboard accessibility. Does my website work with a keyboard? And often there are issues with this, and you can fight them with a screen reader. So it's a really good testing tool. But what happens? Well, I've got this page open. It's the How to Meet WCAG, the quick reference to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And there are all kinds of elements in this view. Which one shall we pick as an example? So we've got somebody joining us who's going to write about accessible names and said, hey, I got it wrong. I made a trick question on Twitter, and it was a bit of a tough one. A lot of people got it wrong because I was mean like that, I guess. And I can even show the question, I guess. Maybe that's a nice starting. We'll get to the question later. It's but accessible names, like every interactive component on your website needs to have an accessible name. There's even a WCAG criteria that really covers this well. It's called name, role, and value. For all user interface components, including but not limited to form elements, links, and components generated by scripts. So interface components, things that are usually interactive. The name and role can be programmatically determined. So that's, I'm going to skip the rest. It's not really necessary for this one. So this is the most important part. The name and role can be programmatically determined. So For example, there's this thing here. I'm not sure if it's a link or a button. We're going to see what it does. We're going to inspect it. And visually, it's... I got to move the DevTools out of the way. There's the text share. And there's this pictogram that we all got to know as this is a share button. I can share stuff with this. And if I look at the source, it says it's a link. And can I? Yeah, so the name and role can be programmatically determined. Well, this is a link. So the role is very clear. It's a link. But what is the name? That's the question. Because when you navigate to any element using a screen reader, it will read out both the name and the role. So the role we got, it's a link. But what is the name? And for that, I'm going to use, just for a moment, Chrome. Oh wait, I am in Chrome. Haha. I usually am in Firefox, but this is Chrome. Chrome has this really useful accessibility tab, I guess, in your DevTools. And it shows you the accessibility tree. And this is sometimes an eye-opener for people, because your website, there's a visual part, there's a generated code, we call that the DOM, the document object model. But from this there is something generated called the accessibility tree. So there's like a sort of copy of the DOM with all this information that's mostly used by assistive technology used by people with disabilities. And it says that we have the web area, so this is like your website, and it's called How to Meet WCAG, quick reference, that's like, I think that's a double name, but that's the title of the page, quick reference. Maybe we can make an issue for that later. But here you see the web area. So that's the website. And there's generic. What's the generic element? That's the body. Yeah, that doesn't have a clear role or doesn't mean anything. It's just the body. You know, you need it. That's clear. Then in the body we have a div. And a div has no specific role. Like a div is one of the most generic elements you can use together with the span. They both have a role of presentation, as they call it. So generic. Not interesting. And then we go back to, where is it? Our share button. I'm going to select it again because it's hard to navigate otherwise. So then there's, I'd rather navigate up. So you can notice how well prepared this story is. There's so much to tell about the accessible name. It's hard to start anywhere. So you've got this whole accessibility tree. There's a region. This could be a main, for example, a main element. There's another region. This could be a section. Another region, maybe another section. I don't know. What is it? Oh, an article. There's an article here with the whole region. And then we've got this one, which is in this article. And it's a footer. And there's a div. And then there's a link. And here it also says link. And it tells you, so we just saw it tells you the tree. Where is it in the whole thing that there is in this complete story? And then what Chrome also tells you is the ARIA attributes. So ARIA are all these additional things that you can add to your code to make things more accessible or to break them. It's a dangerous tool. You can do both. If you don't need ARIA, don't use it. But if you do have to use it well and use it carefully, because you can break a lot of stuff. And then we come to the computed properties. So these are the accessibility properties of this link. And I'm going to skip the first part first. It says role link, just like we said. That's the role. So if you're using a screen reader, it's going to say, hey, this is a link. It's focusable, as links usually are. You can disable focus, but don't disable focus on things that are interactive or supposed to be interactive. And it is focused. Yeah, that was what we're doing already. But then here is the important part, the name. It says the name is a share link to the section 4.1.2 name, role, and value. And how does it come up with this name? First, it looks at ARIA labeled by. This is a specific attribute that you can put on elements. And as a value to this attribute, you can add the ID of another element. And then your first element will look at the second element, and it will get the accessible name of the second element and use it also on the first. So it's not very implicit because you're referring to something else. But this is very useful, for example, when you have something like a landmark or a section, and you can have this landmark or section, you can use aria labeled by, and then you refer to a heading. And then this heading will be the name of this section or landmark. That's a really nice way to create structure in your website. A lot of people use headings to navigate, just like a lot of us visually scan newspapers and we just skip from heading to heading. The same way we can navigate in websites. So the heading structure is very important. And you can use this same heading structure to name your landmarks, your sections. So that's a very useful way to use aria labeled by. But in this case, there is no attribute aria labeled by. So it says not specified. What's the next thing it's going to look at? Aria label. And this is a tool used by many. It says the aria label is share a link to the section, blah, 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 just what we mentioned. So this is the second option, and there's a text inside there. So this is going to be the accessible name of this link. So let's say you are using your screen reader. It will say share a link to the section, blah, 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 link. So it will pronounce the name and the role. If you don't have a name, it would just say link. Nobody finds any value in that. This is often also the case with buttons. People use icons and pictograms in buttons and then forget to give them a name. And then when you use a screen reader, the only thing you'll hear is button, which is, I would say, very confusing, but it's not even confusing. It doesn't tell you anything. This is also very annoying for example, if people use some kind of speech control, like Dragon Natural Speaking. When something doesn't have a name, then how do you call it? You can't. That's the whole problem. Let's say there would have been no aria label. I'm just going to remove it here in my DevTools. So it's now empty. And then it says here, not specified. And it's going to look at the next thing in line. So for a link, the next thing in line is the content of the link. And the content of the link is the text share in capital letters. So if there were no aria label, this would have formed the accessible name. And then as a last resort, we also have an option for a title attribute. And I'm calling this a last resort because using a title attribute, well, you can find some articles on the web if you'd like. Nobody's a big fan of the title attribute, I think. It's a last attribute. You see in the list, it's the last option. So anything will override it, and everybody can override it. So that's already a reason not to use it. Some people say, yeah, but then you can hover over your element and you can see what's in it. But how do you know how to hover over something? It's like going back to the 90s where you had to hover over navigation to see where you were going. It's not very good for usability. And the other thing is, I used to have a web store. I think about two-thirds, maybe even 3/4 of the visitors used a phone or a tablet to navigate to the website. And those people usually use touch. They cannot hover. Most people on the web don't hover because they can't. And that also goes for a lot of assistive technology as well. Hovering is not an option. So putting your accessible name in this title attribute that nobody can see, and that's like a last resort that can break easily. These are just some of the reasons why you shouldn't, but it's an option. So this is the yeah, we see that for links, the title attribute might not be relevant, but for images it is for SEO purposes. Yeah, I've read about SEO and about titles and SEO, and some people say, yeah, you should add something in the title, and people also like to stuff the alt tag of an image. But it might be that the latest updates say, hey, title doesn't do anything for SEO, so I'm not quite sure how it works. But if you do it for SEO, you're free to do so, but don't depend on it for the accessible name. You know, it's like a backup for your SEO, but don't think it's good for the accessible name, because it's probably not. I'm gonna have a look at other elements the same way I just did, because this list of computed properties is specific for links. Different elements get their computed properties in different ways. So I'm gonna press, for example, this, let's say this hide. Here we have a button. This is the button that hides the menu. Show sidebar hides. So it's a really straightforward thing. And again, it shows up in the accessibility tree, and it's called hide sidebar. Hide sidebar is the name, which is appropriate. It's also good for accessibility because the word hide that you see visually is also part of the name. So let's say you're using speech control, as we mentioned earlier, and you want to access this button that says hide. It will actually feel like it's being talked to, I guess. This is the button that's called hide. It's called hide sidebar, but the word hide is in there, so you can reach it by using speech. So we're looking at the computed properties of this button, and it says ARIA labeled by, not specified, just like the last one. But there is an ARIA label called hide sidebar. And that's just like the last one that we saw. It has this ARIA label attribute called hide sidebar. I can remove it just for the idea of it. But that's forming the accessible name. And then if it could not find an accessible name from the ARIA label, it will go to the label. And we're not seeing that here. It's mostly used for input elements, like radio buttons and input fields and text fields and all kinds of pieces of a form. Those usually have a label element. And these label elements are connected in the code to the input or whatever field you're using. And this is very important because if there is no clear relationship between the two, it doesn't do anything. So I'm just going to add it in the code here, just as an example, not because it looks good or it works nicely. So I'm going to say label. And then for a label, you can create a relationship with using for. And you use the ID of the element that you want to name. So the button has the ID hide sidebars. So the label is going to be a label for hide sidebars. That's it. Close it. And we're going to call it hide sidebars. Just so we get this working. So now we have this ugly little bit of text, which is fine. But if we now go to the button, you will see that there's no ARIA labeled by, as we said, no ARIA label because we removed it. But it says there is a label. Ooh. I closed it. It says there's a label. So there's a label and there's a relationship between the label and the button. And it's called hide sidebars. So this works. This works very well. Let me check this. Yeah. So now this button has an accessible name, and it comes from the label. And added value is that you can even see the hover animation already. If you click this label element, you put the focus on whatever is having the relationship with it. So I clicked the label, but the button activated, which is not what you would expect from a button, but it's really useful for form elements, especially like checkboxes and radio buttons. They can be really very tiny, and they require a lot of require a lot from your motor skill. I sometimes have trouble clicking these as well, especially on mobile. I'll just go pinch it and make it larger. But it's really useful if there's a label that you can click and it puts the focus on it. Sadly, this doesn't always happen, or it's hard still to click it. For example, I see a lot of web stores that when you are about to buy something, they say, hey, do you agree to all our terms? And then there's a link within these terms. So you think, hey, I'm going to check this checkbox. I agree to the terms. But then you're clicking a link that's opening the terms. Well, I know you should be reading the terms, of course, but if the label isn't doing what it should be, creating this relationship, creating something clickable, then it's really hard. But that's the label. So we have a label in this case, and if the label weren't there, let's delete it again, then it would look at the contents. And the contents of the button in this case is the word hide. And something that's rather interesting about the contents of a button is that usually all the semantic value of whatever's in there is lost. So I've seen people get really creative with buttons and they put lists in there, or I think list was one of the most creative things. Let's take this example. If you put a list in a button, it loses the value of being a list. Sure, if it's for practice, go ahead. It's good that you want to structure your HTML, but it's not going to do much for the semantic value of it all. And what's even worse, I guess, is if you put a interactive element inside the button. So there's an interactive element inside an interactive element. Usually, I don't even know what's supposed to happen. Are you supposed to be able to click the internal one or the external one? If you press tab to focus with your keyboard, which one should it reach first? The outer one or the inner one? And if you activate the one, should the other also activate? There's a lot of questions that I don't know when two interactive things get inside each other. It doesn't work for me, but it also doesn't work for browsers. It's something you shouldn't do. There's weird, unpredictable behavior. You shouldn't do it. That's the short version of it. So watch out with what you put in a button, but usually the content of a button becomes the accessible name. And that also goes for any images you put in there. And that's also very interesting and something that's useful for a lot of people. Let's say you have a button and you use the image tag inside. If you give this image an alternative text, an alternative name by using the alt attribute, for example, this becomes the name of the button. So when using a button, you should really think about this. Do I want to tell people what the image is? Let's say you have a settings menu, which is a button, and there's an image inside of a cogwheel. Do people want to hear cogwheel image? No. No, they don't want to know that it's a cogwheel. They want to know that it's a settings menu. So then the alternative text of the image becomes settings menu, and that becomes the name of the button. An even better way to do this is like this page that we're looking at. You put in an icon and a name. That's the best, because there's a lot of value in knowing what the icon means. Otherwise, it could basically be anything. It's so hard to guess what an image means. I am pretty literate, I guess, when I browse the web. I know pretty well what I'm doing. I've seen a lot of designs, a lot of these pictograms, and I know a meaning of a lot of them, but most people don't. So maybe you think, hey, this is a tool that people use a lot, they use it often, they'll learn. Yeah, they might, but the first time, people won't know what everything is. And when people don't know how things work the first time, and they have the option to pick something else, they will pick something else. These people will leave your website. So make sure that your buttons are clear in what they do. And the best way to do that is an icon for the people that like to scan and see icons, because they help, they make it more recognizable, but also put the text in there. And a great example for this as well is the hamburger menu. I say hamburger menu, and if you're not technically literate and don't use a lot of websites, you're like, what's a hamburger menu? On a lot of websites, especially on the responsive mobile version, or when you zoom in, when we're talking accessibility, but usually it's the mobile version, you get either in the top left or the top right corner, you get 3 horizontal stripes, and when you click it, you get the menu. People call that the hamburger menu. Why? Because these 3 stripes resemble a hamburger. It's a convention, and you see it on many websites, but it's been tested, and you will actually convert better. People will use your website more and longer when you put the word menu under it, for example, because people don't know. People don't know. Even if like 50% of the websites that I visit is using it for their mobile version, people don't know that these stripes mean that there's a menu. So just adding the word menu clarifies it. It removes all doubt. It also makes it clear for speech control, for example. It's just a really good practice for people to visually see what you're doing. The in-between, if you have an image with an alt text, that's okay. Then you comply and you conform to WCAG. If you have an image and a text, that's even better. And there's something in between. What you also could do is put an image in there and make the text visible for assistive technology only. So visually hidden, they call it. There's a bootstrap class to hide things. There are many ways to do it, but that's also an option. So within the button is an image and a little text, for example, hide, and the text is visually hidden. That's also a way to do it. Why is that better? Well, if your image doesn't load, for example, if there are other problems with the CSS, then there is still this text in there. So it's a bit more robust. I can mention a lot of things, but the best case is still put a text in there visually and put an image in there visually. That's the best that you can do. So that's a little bit about buttons. That was not a little bit. Let's see if we have an input field anywhere here. Maybe in the filters. Oh, here we have checkboxes. And I'm gonna guess that these labels, level A, level AA, level AAA, these are label elements connected to the checkbox. Why do I think this? Because I hover them, and I already get a hover state on the checkbox. So if I click them, it disables level A. Click level A again, and it enables. So this is much like the example we just had. You have a label, and it's connected in the code to the element that needs the name. So I'm going to inspect it just to make sure how it's created. I'm going to scroll up a little. So here up we have our visual version. And then in the code, indeed, you see a label. And the label is actually wrapping the input, because I just used this for an ID combination. That's a way to associate them. But you can also use the label to wrap the input. And the label is wrapping the input. The content is a input and the text level A, as we can see. And if we click on the input, you can see it has no ARIA label, no ARIA label by, nothing special going on. But when we look at computed, no, not computed, accessibility, and then the computed properties, it will say checkbox level A here in the accessibility tree. And that's what it's supposed to be. It's a checkbox and its name is level A. Then we look at the computed properties, the name level A, not from ARIA label by, not from ARIA label. It's getting it from the label, and it says here wrapped. Unlike the last label that we had, it also had a different text here. I think it said something like 4, and now it says wrapped. And it says label level A, just like we expected. And it says contents not specified, title not specified. So there's one thing creating the name. That's the label, and it works. The label also becomes interactive, is beneficial for users with motor disabilities who would otherwise have problems clicking the checkbox or another element. Yeah, that's true. Very true. That's why I said, like, if I'm on a mobile, I also enlarge stuff. My motor skills are not perfect. And especially with checkboxes and radio buttons, they can be so tiny. There's some research been done, and it's AAA criteria right now. I think I can even show it. Let's go for touch. No, wait, I need to AA as well. Target size. Yeah, it's AAA. Okay. I didn't need that, but I just couldn't find it on touch because it's target size. So there's a AAA criteria, or criterion, I must say. And AAA means it's like the toughest version of WCAG, and not a lot of people follow AAA, but this is a really good practice. It should have been AA. It should have been used by everybody. But it says that the size of the target for pointer inputs is at least 44 by 44 CSS pixels. So the size of, for example, a button should be at least 44 by 44. And that makes it easier for people to touch it on their phone, to click it with their mouse, to use a pointer device. There are many ways to activate controls. And it's much easier if it's at least 44 by 44. And this is based on the Android guidelines, on Apple iOS guidelines. There's been a lot of research in how large should something be. And this 44 by 44 makes it really, really useful. So if you make things and you have the space, it doesn't have to even be visual. But see if you can make it 44 by 44. I think I did it on my website somewhere as well. Am I typing my website correctly? I never go there. So you can see these links that I have in the top. They are very high. Why are they so high? Computed size They are 48 pixels high, so they are easily clickable or touchable or pointable or lickable or noseable. I don't care what you do. They are large enough for anything. So these links on my website, I made them this large so people can easily use them. And the same goes for other links. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Like this. A link to Twitch. Hey, what's Twitch? Well, that's what we're doing right now. This link. Yeah, I want the size. Oh, this one could be larger even. This is 32 pixels high. This is not a thing I changed, apparently. But this one could be even better. I think then it's the filters. So I go to my portfolio. Oh yeah, these look like sort of buttons. They're actually labels, but you won't notice. These are also not big enough. Oh, see now I can say this is a learning experience for all of us. I guess these are also 32 pixels high. Maybe I was too early when I made this. So these could be even bigger. There is some spacing below it. Oh yeah, now I see it. I thought I had to look at the computed size here, but it's actually with the padding. It's much bigger. So it's 32 plus 10 plus 10. So we've got 42, 52. And then there's even a border and a margin, but that doesn't matter for the clickable. So 52 pixels. Oh, thank goodness. I was already scaring myself. Now let's look at the Twitch link again. Did I look wrong there as well? No, that should be bigger. Okay, so these links can be improved. I also want to change things about my website anyway, but it's like perpetual developer stress, I guess. If you have a website, you want to change it. Let's go back here. So we just looked at the target size of this one, so it's improved because you can click the label as well. And there's this only thing. Let's see if we can find another element that we haven't tried yet. So these are all the same. Maybe this select. See how that's named, just to get an impression, because the way the name is computed is different between different elements. So this is a select, and it does take ARIA label by, but it's not been specified. It takes an ARIA label as well, but that's also not been specified. There is a label, and this one has a different relationship. So the last one we saw, it had the wrapping. This one says from label for. So it's using a for attribute. Is that true? Yeah, we look here in the code. Label for WCAG version, I guess. Yeah. And that's the one linked to this one. So I can click it. And it also puts the focus. So now the focus, this is hard to see maybe. I'm closing this. So I click just on the background here to focus nothing specifically. And I use my up and down arrows, and this scrolls. But when I click WCAG version, it puts the focus on the select. I use my up and down arrows and it changes the version. So again, the label puts the focus on whatever it's related to. And then we go back to the accessible name. And you see, if it had not had a label, I could have specified the title as well. It's possible. What's interesting here is there's something else going on. I'll go down the list of computed properties. It also has a description. So this is not something that is required at any point. There's no WCAG criterion that says everything should have a description. But if this select is read out by a screen reader, for example, it will first say WCAG version, because that's the name. That's also very unique. That's what you want to hear when you browse a website. And it says combo box, because that is the role. A select in Chrome is announced as a combo box, role combo box. And then afterwards, it can read out a description. It depends on the settings of the screen reader, and it might take a second. It might have a short pause. But there's also a description, and in this case, the description says, and I can open it here because it's below, note, clear filters will not change the selected version. So descriptions are really useful for things like text inputs because you can put instructions there or error messages. So let's say you have a input that requires a date and the date should be in a specific format. Then you can use a description with a span or any element you like. That doesn't really matter for this case. And the text in there, you can use it as a description. Now, how are those linked? Well, we talked about aria labeled by. This one uses aria described by. So just like aria labeled by, it uses aria described by with an ID, and the ID is version hint, I guess. And the paragraph below it has the ID of version hint. So that's how it becomes the description. And you see that in the computed properties of Chrome. You see that there's a name, WCAG version, and you see the description, note, clear filters, etc. And that's a really useful way to add some more information, especially when something goes wrong or when there are instructions. Please connect it to your input so people know what it's all about. Now there's one thing I want to try, and I'm gonna scroll to the top of the page. I think, do we have any text field here? I wish we had a text field, but there's no search function or anything, I think, because text fields are another case. No text fields, right? No. Scrolling to the bottom. Then I'm just gonna get the ultimate example, just google.com. There's a large text field. When I inspect this one, I said inspect. See, I talked about my motor skills and I misclick. It works that way. There's an input. And I'm gonna look at the accessibility properties. It's a combo box, but it's a text input. And why do I want to show a text input? Because there's another option. There's another option when you have a text input, and that's a really interesting one. But not because it's a good one. So the name is search. And where does this come from? Does it come from aria label by? No, it does not come from aria label by because it's not specified. So it does not have this attribute. That's fine. Aria label, it says search. Okay, there's an aria label with search. Is that true? Yeah, it's right here in the code. Aria label is search. So search is the value and aria label is the attribute. Then it says from label. No, there's not a label element. We already have our name, so we don't need anything else, but just to show the whole thing. I'm gonna remove the aria label just to get an impression. So there's no label. But then there's an option that we didn't see in our button. We did not see with the radio button or with a checkbox. You won't see this. It's called a placeholder. And I'm just gonna add it. Not because you should, but because I can. Placeholder is search. What happens when you have a placeholder? A placeholder is when you have a text in a field. And yeah, it should hold the place of whatever goes in there, I guess. But the thing is, people use the placeholder as an accessible name. And there are some issues with that. Two things stand out for me. One of it is that when you start typing, it goes away. So this one doesn't have a visual label at all. So it's much less of an issue here. But often when there is something and there's a placeholder that becomes the label, the accessible name of this input, you need this name the most when you're using it. So when it goes away, you start typing and it goes away. That's like the moment you need it the most. That's really counterintuitive. It's not very good for usability. So if you have a large form with lots of text fields, I start typing there and maybe I've typed something. I don't know anymore what should go in there. Sometimes even the placeholder tells you how to format something. So if we had the example of a date, for example, it will say day / month / year. And then it puts that, the formatting hint, the instruction on how you should format this, it puts it in the field. So when you look at the field, you might think, hey, I know how to format this. I know how this works. It's not really even good because not everybody understands what this is, but yeah, just for the example. So when you look at the field, hey, you think these instructions, I understand where they go. But then when you click it and you start typing and you're like, oh, wait again. Was this a European date? Was this a US date? How was it formatted? You're unable to find it because a placeholder disappears when you start using the input. So placeholders are counterintuitive. I would not use them if I were you. And then there's the other issue. I'm not sure if that's the case here. I'm gonna get my color contrast tool just to get an impression. These might just be okay. Picking the color. Yeah, this one fails as well, as it should. The thing is, placeholders are not actual input. They can be confused with input, which is another issue, but they are not actual input. So what people often do is they make them gray. You know, you make your actual input, you make it really dark gray, maybe even black. And then if you have a placeholder, you make it a bit lighter to show, hey, this is not actual input. But then this becomes a contrast issue. So for example, this placeholder is a shade of gray on a white background. It has a contrast ratio of 2.6 to 1. Even if it were very large text, which it isn't, it should be at least 3.0 to 1. If it were large text, it would be, if it's this text size, it would be 4.5 to 1. So this contrast fails for large text, it fails for small text. The contrast for placeholder text is often just terrible. So even if some of us see it, if it's useful for some of us, it's only when you're not using the input and when you don't have contrast issues and when the placeholder is actually clear. So the use case is very limited and gets worse when you start using it. So those are some of the issues with placeholders, and placeholders only work for some elements, thankfully. So don't use them for your accessible name. Don't use them at all, because you're gonna have contrast issues. And there's even an ARIA placeholder. I'm not even sure when you would use that. Like it's not even showing. It's like a backup for an accessible name, but why not just use ARIA label, because that's much more solid and robust. I don't know. And then again, if ARIA placeholder doesn't work, then there's the search in the title attribute. Yeah, last resort. Because when you hover this, does it work? It says search. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's going to be useful for anybody. So those are some of the accessible names that we have. What more can I say about accessible names? There's so much going on because it varies for each element. I'm just gonna check another one. Here, it's an input type submit. And there's another input type submit, so a sort of button. And you also see that in the accessibility tree. We also talked about the accessibility, so that's really useful. And there you also see it's a button and it's called Google Search. So how is it finding this name? Well, it has an ARIA attribute, ARIA label. Oh, is that true? Then we see the computed properties name, Google Search. It's not using labeled by, it's using the label Google Search. There's not even a label element. There's also a value, Google Search. Yeah. This button has a value. Doesn't really need it. Maybe it's for backend stuff. They could have put text in there, but then again, you're using input instead of a button element, so then you, yeah. I guess this is the lightest way. I'll not question the ways of performance and loading time. So there's a value in there. So because this is an input of the type submit, it can also have a value. And that's another way of supplying the accessible name. But it's not being used, the value. Then there's also the content, Google Search, which is actually the same as the value in this case, but it's also not being used. And for this one, there is no title attribute. I'm not sure why this has a title attribute and this doesn't, but hey, it doesn't have one. And it also says the description is Google Search. So that's funny. Probably from the I always have to think about, because there's the accessible name that gets calculated. That's very clear in Chrome. And then there's another calculation for the description, which is a bit more complicated because it means if this element is not used for the name, then use it for the description. So I'm not entirely sure how this one comes up. It's from either the value of the content or the content, because the label is already used, but that's not part of the story today. Otherwise, I would have made a test case. But and then there's the other input. Same story there. It's called I'm Feeling Lucky from the ARIA label. There's no normal label. There's a value and the contents, but it's not being used. So that gives an impression as well. What more do we see? There's this little icon. It's a div with a role is button and an ARIA label on it and a tab index, so it's reachable by keyboard. I'm not sure why they made this a div. This could have been a button. I often wonder why people make divs instead of buttons, because buttons come with a lot of native behavior that you don't have to code. So it's often much lighter as well, much easier to create, much easier to do many things with. There used to be the argument that it's harder to style, but it's so easy to style a button. Just look it up. You're looking up anything and everything anyways, because you're a programmer, so you might as well look up how to style a button. It's like 3 or 4 lines, depending on what browsers you want to support. If you use only the most modern browsers, I think it's only 1 line of CSS. Like, I think you can do something like reset all, and then all the button styling is gone. I mean, I think that's a lot less code than you'd have to write in JavaScript to make a perfectly accessible button. So, but anyway, this one, how is it calculated? Well, as we saw, it has the role of button because it's not an actual button. If there were no button role, it would have been ignored. It would have been a div. It would have had a role of presentation. It would be semantically useless. It would tell us nothing about its intentions. And the name is search by voice. How is that specified? Well, there's no label by, but there is a label called search by voice. It has no content and no title, this div. There is an SVG in here, but this SVG by itself has no accessible name. It also has no semantics on it. It's just there for decoration, basically. There's also a tooltip. I'm not even gonna start about tooltips, then we need another few hours. But this is it. So it's a div with an SVG in there, and it gets its name from the ARIA label. So what more do we have? We have this image here. I think that's just... Where is this image located? So there's an SVG inside a span, inside a div, inside a div, inside a div, inside a div. And it's in a div, in a div, in a form. Okay. So this is just an image. That's the short version of it all. And it's getting ignored. Why is it ignored? Because it does not have a role. So if you want to make this an image, that's possible. You give it role is image. If it had actual use, if it communicated anything, then you could give it a role as image. But naming SVGs is a bit complicated. Support is a bit wobbly, so I wouldn't put it. I wouldn't just put random stuff in there. I would test it. Different browser and screen reader combinations, for example. SVGs are a bit wonky in the support. So okay, let's see. What have we else? The Google logo. Does it have an accessible name? Yes, it does. And this is a great example that we didn't have yet. The Google logo is an image. Actually, it's an image with a source set. So there are several PNGs that can be used to fill this space. But it's an image tag, an image element, and it has a PNG. And the good thing about the image tag is you can use the alt attribute. And the alt attribute means you're giving it an alternative text. And this alternative text in this case is Google, which is exactly the text that we're seeing as well. It's what that image is trying to tell us. This is Google. If you were in any way doubting where we are, this is Google. So the alt text is Google, and we see this also in the accessibility tree. It says here image Google. And then you see the computed properties. It says name Google, not from the ARIA label by, not from the ARIA label, but from the alt attribute. We didn't see this with buttons. We didn't see this with links. We didn't see this with any of the form elements because the alt attribute is specific to the image element. And it overrides the title because practically everything overrides the title. And the role is that of image because it is an image. And by default, an image is an image. It's not very surprising. What is very nice about images is, let's say this image was not very useful. This happens. For example, like the looking glass that we saw. The magnifying glass, whatever name you want to use. Let's say this image was decorative. It's possible. In that case, you could remove the word Google from the alt tag. This is what we call an empty alt. And this completely hides the image. It is as if you had set ARIA hidden on there. I'm going to reload it just a second to show you what happens. So there we are again, the div with the logo. We don't need the logo, we need the image. Yes. Oh no, I clicked the wrong element. Where did it go? This one, right? Is this not... Oh, it's somewhere in a custom element. We just had it. Where did it go? That doesn't help us at all. Maybe I'm part of some test. I'm also in an iframe. Gonna reload the page by typing google.com. I'm getting a different site now. I was in an iframe just before and now I'm on google.com again directly. Okay, so I'm part of some test, I guess. Scary stuff when you're inspecting stuff and it changes. What we want to say, images and the alt tag. So what I can do to this image is add a ARIA attribute. Just doing it here. ARIA hidden is true. What does that mean? ARIA hidden is true means it gets removed from the accessibility tree. You see here it's ignored now. It's no longer an image, it says ignored. So it's like the whole image is gone. And that's one thing, but also if this were something that could have content, like a div or a landmark or whatever elements we mentioned before, if you put ARIA hidden on something, all of its children are hidden as well. And it doesn't help if you have a child element and you put ARIA hidden is false on there. You cannot unhide it. What is hidden is hidden. So ARIA hidden hides stuff from the accessibility tree. And that means that you can put roles in there and accessible names like as much as you like, but it won't do anything. And the funny thing about the image tag is I can remove this ARIA hidden again. It will reappear here in the accessibility tree. But when I remove the alt text, so I make an empty alt, it also disappears. So if you have an image that is decorative, you can put an alt on that image. You should actually put an alt on that image. That's what people want. And that's according to specifications how you should do it. And then this image disappears from the accessibility tree. It is as if it had ARIA hidden on it. So that's like this magic thing that images do. It's very useful. And you can use it a lot, even though SVGs are becoming very popular and it becomes maybe a little bit less relevant. But this is the way that you can hide images very easily. And what's also nice to hear, or nice to know, is let's say I don't have this alt attribute. I don't add it, which is a really bad practice. Then there are no computed properties in this case. There's nothing to fall back on, not even our blessed title attribute. So what happens then with some screen readers, if you navigate to this image, it will read out the name, like not the accessible name, but the file name of the image. So it would say Google logo underscore color underscore 272 x92 dp.png or something alike. Which is a very good reason to do add an accessible name or hide it otherwise, because it's completely useless. And you might wonder, like, how important is this accessible name? Like, is this not basic HTML? Yes, it should be. But there is a project called the Web Aim Million. It says it better than I could. An annual accessibility analysis of the top 1 million homepages. So each year, this automated tool looks at 1 million homepages on the web, and they're really the most popular pages. And it analyzes these. And it will look at things like alternative text. And there were 38,426,701 images in the sample. So in this million pages, there were 38 million images for an average of 38.4 images per homepage. And 31.3% of all images, so that's an average of 12 per page, had missing alternative text. And they don't mean an empty alt. So it's not a conscious choice of hiding the element. They had no alt attribute at all. Which is like basic HTML to me. But apparently this is still something that's going wrong many times. And then important to note, over half of the images missing alternative text. So 31.3 was missing. And then 16.8 of all of them, they were linked images. So just like we spoke about buttons, if you have an anchor, a link, and there's nothing in there except for an image, the image becomes the accessible name of the link. But if the image does not have an accessible name, then the link doesn't get one either. So you get a link that doesn't mean anything, that doesn't do anything. Well, it opens a page, of course, but it doesn't tell you anything. So what's a popular use case for this is, let's say you have a footer on your page, and you have an image with a link that sends you to Facebook and to LinkedIn and to Twitter and Instagram and all these social images. If these images don't have an alt text, then the links won't have an alt text, and you will have a lot of users that have no idea what these links do. And apparently, a lot of people do this wrong. Then there are 9.3% of the images that were assigned alternative text had questionable or repetitive alternative text, such as alt is image, graphic, or blank. So if you have an image and you put in an alt text and you say it's an image, it doesn't add value. Then your screen reader is going to say image, image. Yeah, we already knew that part. If it's going to say graphic, it's not adding image information either. Blank doesn't add information. A file name is not useful. So there are many ways to fill it in wrongly. The biggest example of doing it wrong is Twitter. I can show Twitter here, I guess. No, twitter.com. Thank you. I'm not logged in. Let's try. Is this my password? No. That's not. That was my old insecure password. Haha. So we're going to pull on another browser where I am logged in, and I'm going to check my own profile because I usually add alt text, and there's a very good reason for that. I'm just going to say media, so it shows all the images. So on December the 1st, I got an advent calendar, and I was tweeting an image, so I thought, let's add an alt text. And it even says here with a small icon, alt. But when I inspect it, oh no, this is actually the good example, so this is expecting going right. So when I expect it, it says Harry Potter, Lego 75981 Harry Potter Advent Calendar, lots of small blah blah blah. So it has the old text that I entered, which is cool. This is how it should be. What happens if you tweet an image without alt text? And I'm just gonna look at the trending stuff because that's usually a mess. Best Linux blog in a Unix verse, whatever. So I'm gonna guess this is a popular image. It probably doesn't have an alt tag. They probably didn't enter any text. I'm sorry, but that's usually the way it goes. So I inspect the image, and what does it say? Image, alt is image. So if you are using Twitter and you don't add an alt text for people to learn what your image is, to actually be able to know what it is, Twitter says, well, we have a great default for that. Let's put image in there. We're going to tell you that your image is an image. So when you're looking at these WebAIM websites, they have a great example in Twitter. They're going to tell you what it already is. It's not a name. So yeah, that's the story about images. Make sure that you use alt text for images, because there can be a lot of information in the image, and the alt text of an image can play a role in other elements, like a link or a button. I think we've had about most of the common patterns here for alt text. There's a lot of value in there, so the last thing that we can do is the quiz that I had this week. So I'm going back to my profile. I used this in a presentation as well. It was really good because a lot of people were wrong. That's great for the use case. I'm sorry, but that's so very true. I'm scrolling down my Twitter list. Sorry for all the scrolling. Here. So, I hope after this piece of streaming, you know what this is all about. But here we go. Let's say you have an element. It's a button. Type is button. That's what you need to add in your HTML. Yeah, and as Sophie says in the chat, it's very strange for Twitter to do this, to have this image as an alt default. An empty one as default would have been better, yeah, because then it's not noise. Now it's actually annoying people probably. If you go with your screen reader through Twitter, you're gonna hear image, 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 or if you're using a different screen reader, you're gonna hear image graphic. It's no added value. And if they added an empty alt as a default, then at least it would be ignored. So, yeah. So we had this element, a button, type of button. That's how you just make the HTML. Then you have aria labeled by button. Aria label is click here. And title is click. And inside the button, there's an image with the alt click me. And the big question was, what becomes the accessible name of this button? So as we've just learned, a title can be sometimes the accessible name of an element, but it's like a last resort. So the accessible name click, which was option 2, 8.4% still thought, hey, maybe it's click. It was not click. Next in the list, going up like last resort, and then the one before that is if there is content in the button, in this case an image with the alt click me, that could have been the accessible name. 10.5% says click me. That's probably the accessible name of the button, but no, that was not the case. Because even more important than click me is the aria label, and the aria label said click here. Overrules any content, overrules any title. 64.2% thought, yeah, click here. That must be the accessible name. But what's the actual case here is that there is an aria labeled by, and it refers to an element with the ID of button. We don't know if there is a button in the code. We cannot see from this. But for answering the question, what becomes the accessible name of this button is we don't know. It could be that there is a element with the ID of button that becomes the accessible name. It could be that this element doesn't have an accessible name. It could be that the element also has the name click here, which would be kind of strange in this case. But the answer is number 4, other. That's the answer to me. Of course, I can imagine that people say, hey, but this is all the code there is, so how could we have known? Yeah, that's perfectly fine. But the important part is trying to get an image of what an accessible name is and how it's formed. So that's the story of this one. And we had 95 votes, so almost 100, which makes it easy for percentages. So that means almost 2/3 said it's click here. But we still had almost 20% saying it's click me or click, which is definitely not the case. So one out of 5 was on a path that wasn't it. So that's it for tonight, I think. I've told a lot about accessible names. If there are any questions, any situation, I really find that Chrome is really useful for this. I mean, I can do this in Firefox as well. So I'm just going to open google.com, inspect it with Firefox, and I can inspect the accessibility properties. And it does say name, Google, scroll graphic. But I really like the way that you see how it's calculated in Chrome. That's really added value. So that's why for this I really like Chrome. It teaches you something, and I think that's always good. Usually when testing a page, I use a screen reader because it goes much faster. You don't have to inspect everything. For a quick check, you're perfectly fine using Firefox, but Chrome is really useful to understand what it's based on. So I guess that's going to be it for tonight. Are there any questions from the chat maybe? I'm not forgetting about you. I know you're there. If there's anything, this is the moment. And if there's nothing right now, well, questions are always welcome to be asked later, of course. So I'm gonna end here for today. Thank you very much. If there is anything, you can always reach me on Twitter and ask me anything. That's the way this goes. And good luck naming things. Thank you very much, and good